Dr. Ju Park floated through the dimly lit corridor of the ISS Prometheus, pushing herself forward with practiced motions. Red emergency lights cast long shadows as she made her way to the damaged section. The ship had experienced an unexpected power surge 12 hours ago, leaving several critical systems offline, and the crew scrambling to make repairs. "Engineering to bridge," she said into her comm unit. "I've reached the main power coupling. It's worse than we thought." Captain Minho's voice crackled back. "How long, Dr. Park?" Juwoo examined the blackened components, pulling a small flashlight from her belt. 4 hours, maybe 5. "I need to replace the entire regulator assembly." She opened her toolkit, selecting a manual spanner. Her fingers moved with confidence born from years of practice. At the Space Academy, her instructors had insisted all engineers learn manual repair techniques, despite the availability of automated systems. "Technology fails," her mentor had said, "but human hands remain reliable." Those words had seemed old-fashioned then. Now, with half the ship's systems down, they felt like wisdom. As she worked, Juwoo hummed quietly to herself. There was something satisfying about physical repairs, feeling the resistance of a bolt, hearing the click of components locking into place. Modern engineers increasingly relied on drones and AI systems, but Juwoo had always preferred the direct approach. Her comm unit suddenly buzzed with urgency. "Dr. Park, report to the bridge immediately," Captain Minho ordered, his voice tight with tension. When Juwoo arrived, the bridge buzzed with unusual activity. The main screen displayed an unidentified vessel, unlike any ship Juwoo had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, its shape fluid and organic rather than the utilitarian design of human vessels. "We picked up a distress signal 20 minutes ago," Communications Officer Taeho explained. Then this appeared. Captain Minho turned to Juwoo. "It's broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know existed. Somehow, our systems translated enough to understand they're requesting engineering assistance." "First contact," someone whispered. Juwoo felt her heartbeat quicken. Humanity had searched the stars for decades, hoping to find intelligent life. Now it had found them instead. "They're requesting permission to dock," Taeho said. "Their propulsion system is failing." Captain Minho straightened his uniform. "Grant permission. Dr. Park, you'll head the engineering team to assist." 3 hours later, Juwoo stood at the airlock, surrounded by security personnel. The inner door of the alien ship opened with a soft hiss. The being that emerged walked upright on 2 legs, but any similarity to humans ended there. Its body was slender, covered in what looked like fine scales that shifted color with movement. 4 arms emerged from its torso, each ending in 6-fingered hands. Its head was elongated, with large eyes that glowed faintly in the ship's lighting. "Greetings," the being said, its mouth not moving. The words seemed to form directly in Juwoo's mind. "I am Lyra, chief engineer of the Navirian vessel Harmony of Thought." Captain Minho stepped forward. "I am Captain Minho of the International Spaceship Prometheus. We welcome you and offer our assistance." Lyra's scales rippled, shifting from blue to a soft purple. "Your response to our distress call is appreciated. Our main propulsion crystal has developed microfractures. We cannot repair it with our current resources. Dr. Park is our chief engineer," Minho said, gesturing toward Juwoo. "She will assist you." Lyra turned those glowing eyes toward Juwoo. Something like curiosity passed across her alien features. "You are the one who will help repair our vessel." "I am," Juwoo replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her toolkit hanging from her belt. "Then I will show you our systems," Lyra said. The interior of the Navirian ship was like nothing Juwoo had ever seen. Corridors seemed to shift and adapt as they walked through them. Surfaces glowed with soft light that had no visible source. There were no obvious control panels, no exposed machinery. Everything was seamlessly integrated. When they reached the engine room, Juwoo finally saw something she recognized as technology. A large crystalline structure pulsed at the center, surrounded by flowing patterns of light. "This is our propulsion crystal," Lyra explained. It harnesses quantum fluctuations to generate movement through space. Ju approached carefully. May I examine it? Of course, Lyra said, but her tone suggested surprise. Though I don't understand how you would do so without proper neural interfaces. Ju pulled out a small scanner from her toolkit. We have our ways. As she began her examination, she noticed Lyra watching her with increasing interest. The alien scales shifted to a curious yellow-green. You used physical tools? Lyra finally asked. Your species has achieved space travel without direct neural connections to your technology. Ju nodded, adjusting her scanner. We have neural interfaces too, but many of us still prefer manual methods for critical systems. How? Quaint, Lyra said. The word didn't sound insulting in Ju's mind, merely puzzled. The Navirian people haven't used physical tools for engineering in over 3 centuries. How do you make repairs if your systems fail? Ju asked. Our systems don't fail, Lyra replied with what sounded like pride. Our technology is self-healing and... She stopped as her eyes fell on the damaged crystal. Well, generally self-healing. Ju smiled as she continued her scan. Even the most advanced technology has its limits. That's why we keep the old ways alive. As data appeared on her scanner screen, Ju began to understand the problem. The crystal's atomic structure was destabilizing from the inside out. I think I can help, she said, putting away her scanner. But I'll need equipment from my ship and assistance from your crew. Lyra's scales shifted to a deep blue. You believe you can repair quantum crystalline technology with your manual methods. I can try, Ju said. Sometimes simple solutions work for complex problems. For the first time, Lyra seemed unsure. Her large eyes studied Ju carefully. Very well, human engineer. Show me these Archaic techniques of yours. Perhaps there is something to learn from them after all. As they walked back toward the Prometheus, Ju couldn't help but smile. First contact had begun with a broken engine, perhaps the most universal language in the cosmos. Ju spread her tools on the floor of the Navirian engine room. Each one had been selected with care from her personal collection aboard the Prometheus. Lyra watched with obvious curiosity as Ju organized wrenches, calibrators, and diagnostic devices. Your species still relies on such primitive methods? Lyra asked. Her scales shifted to a pale yellow that Ju was beginning to recognize as the color of curiosity. We don't think of them as primitive, Ju replied, selecting a specialized scanner. We think of them as reliable. Lyra's 4 arms moved in a fluid gesture that might have been the Navirian equivalent of a shrug. Our engineers interface directly with systems through neural connections. Physical manipulation is considered inefficient. Ju looked up from her work. And when your neural systems fail, what then? They don't fail, Lyra said with absolute confidence. The human engineer smiled but said nothing as she continued her examination of the damaged propulsion crystal. The fractures were spreading through its structure like tiny lightning bolts. According to Lyra, the crystal controlled the Navirian ship's ability to manipulate quantum fields for faster-than-light travel. To Ju, it looked like a very fancy engine with very ordinary problems. I need to stabilize these fracture lines before they reach the core, Ju explained, pointing to her scanner display. Then we can attempt to repair the molecular structure. Lyra blinked her large eyes. That would require direct atomic manipulation. Without neural interfaces, how would you possibly? She stopped mid-sentence as Ju pulled out what looked like a simple metal box with an array of small nozzles. Molecular binder, Ju explained. It delivers programmed nanobots that repair atomic bonds. We've been using them for hull breaches for decades. But how do you control them without programming? Ju said, tapping the side of the device. Some problems need thinking ahead of time, not during. Lyra watched in silence as Ju calibrated her equipment. The Navirian scales had shifted to a deep blue that Ju hadn't seen before. She wondered if it indicated skepticism or perhaps offense. On my world, Lyra finally said, "Engineers are born, not trained. Our neural capacities determine our roles. I was identified as having superior spatial temporal reasoning when I was still developing. I have never known any path but engineering." Jiwoo looked up. "On Earth, people choose their paths. I became an engineer because I loved taking things apart as a child. My parents thought I would grow out of it." She smiled at the memory. "I never did." As they worked, more differences emerged. Lyra could perceive quantum fluctuations directly through her neural implants, but couldn't feel the subtle vibrations that told Jiwoo when a component was about to fail. The Nivarian understood theoretical physics at a level that made Jiwoo's head spin, yet had never learned how to splice a wire or bypass a circuit. 2 days into the repairs, a power surge hit both ships simultaneously. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by emergency beacons. "What's happening?" Lyra's voice sounded panicked in the darkness. "Power surge," Jiwoo said calmly, reaching for her toolkit. She pulled out a small hand-powered light and switched it on. "Probably feedback from our repair attempts." Lyra's scales had gone ashen gray. "I cannot connect to the ship systems. My neural interface is offline." "Then we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way," Jiwoo said, pulling out a manual diagnostic tool. "Can you show me where your backup systems are located?" Lyra's voice was small when she replied, "We don't have backup systems. All controls are integrated through the main neural network." Jiwoo stopped what she was doing. "You mean there's no manual override? No secondary controls?" "There was never a need," Lyra said. "Our systems are self-healing and redundant." "Except when they're not," Jiwoo said, trying to keep frustration from her voice. "Okay, let's think. The propulsion crystal is connected to your ship's main power supply, right?" Lyra nodded in the dim light. "Then we need to create a bypass. If we can restore minimal power, your neural systems might reboot." For the next 6 hours, Jiwoo worked by handheld light, teaching Lyra how to identify circuits, splice connections, and create manual overrides where none had existed before. The Nivarian was awkward at first, her 6-fingered hands unused to physical manipulation of small components, but she was a quick learner. "This is not how I was trained to interact with technology," Lyra admitted as she carefully stripped the coating from a cable under Jiwoo's guidance. "Different approaches have different strengths," Jiwoo replied. "Your neural interfaces are incredible when they work, but sometimes you need to get your hands dirty." When they finally managed to restore power to the Nivarian ship's basic systems, Lyra's neural connection re-established itself. Her scales flushed a bright pink that Jiwoo hadn't seen before. "I feel it again," she said, relief evident in her voice. "The ship's consciousness." "Your ship is alive?" Jiwoo asked, surprised. "Not alive as you understand it," Lyra explained, "but aware in its own way. All Nivarian technology maintains a form of consciousness. That's why neural interfaces work. We communicate rather than control." Jiwoo considered this as she packed away her tools. "That's beautiful, actually. On Earth, we're just starting to develop truly sentient AI systems." Later, when both ships had recovered from the power surge, Lyra approached Jiwoo with what appeared to be a small metal object. "I had the ship create this for you," she said, holding it out. Jiwoo accepted the gift, turning it over in her hands. It was a perfectly crafted miniature version of her favorite wrench. "It's a token of respect," Lyra explained, her scales now a deep purple. "I once thought physical tools were primitive. Now I see they represent something important, a direct connection between problem and solution." "Thank you," Jiwoo said, genuinely touched. "Maybe there's wisdom in both our approaches." Lyra's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps that is the beginning of true understanding between our peoples. Your ways may be archaic, human, but they possess an elegance I had not expected." The warning came too late. A massive solar flare erupted from the nearby star, sending a wave of radiation toward both ships. Captain Minho's voice crackled over the comm system just seconds before impact. All personnel, brace for electromagnetic pulse. Juwu barely had time to close her toolkit before the wave hit. The lights on the Prometheus flickered but remained on, the ship's hardened systems performing as designed. But aboard the Navirian vessel, everything went dark at once. "Lyra," Juwu called into the darkness. "Are you okay?" There was no response. Juwu activated her emergency light and swept its beam around the engine room. She found Lyra huddled against a wall, her scales a dull gray. The Navirian's 4 arms were wrapped tightly around herself in what looked like a protective gesture. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Juwu rushed to her side. "The connection. It's gone," Lyra whispered. Her large eyes seemed unfocused. "I cannot feel the ship. I cannot feel anything." Juwu realized what had happened. The electromagnetic pulse had not only disabled the Navirian ship's systems, but had also disrupted Lyra's neural implants. For a species that lived in constant connection with their technology, this was more than an inconvenience. It was like losing a sense. "Can you stand?" Juwu asked gently. "We need to check on your crew." Lyra rose unsteadily. How are your systems still functioning?" "EMP shielding," Juwu explained. "We learned the hard way after the solar storm of 2032 knocked out half of Earth's satellites. Now all our ships have analog backups and hardened circuits." Throughout the Navirian ship, the scene was the same. The crew wandered in confusion, their neural connections severed by the pulse. Many seemed almost childlike in their helplessness, unable to interact with their own technology without their neural interfaces. Juwu contacted the Prometheus. "Captain, the Navirian ship is completely disabled. Their crew is. They're not handling it well. Request permission to bring our emergency generator aboard." "Granted," Captain Minho replied. "But Dr. Park, our long-range scanners show more solar activity." This might be just the beginning. With the help of 2 engineers from the Prometheus, Juwu connected an emergency power generator to the Navirian ship's systems. It was a crude solution, like powering a quantum computer with a hand crank, but it provided enough energy to restore basic life support and lighting. "This won't restart your neural systems," she explained to Lyra. "The connections are too delicate, but it will keep everyone alive until we figure something out." Lyra's scales had taken on a mottled blue-gray pattern. "Without our neural connections, we cannot operate our technology. We cannot navigate. We cannot even perform basic ship functions." "Then we'll have to do things the human way," Juwu said firmly. "Show me your bridge." The Navirian command center was nothing like a human bridge. There were no chairs, no control panels, just a circular room with a floor that pulsed with soft light. Under normal circumstances, the Navirian captain would stand here and control the ship through direct neural commands. "It's useless now," Lyra said, her voice flat. "Without the neural interface, this is just an empty room." Juwu studied the space carefully. "Maybe not. Your ship still has physical components underneath all this. Power conduits, data channels, structural elements. We just need to find a way to access them directly." For the next 12 hours, Juwu led a team of human engineers in what amounted to emergency surgery on the Navirian vessel. They cut through the ship's smooth walls to expose the underlying systems, created makeshift control panels, and rigged manual overrides for critical functions. The Navirian crew watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans essentially took apart their beautiful ship, exposing its inner workings in ways they had never seen before. "This is barbaric," one Navirian officer commented, scales flashing an angry red. "This is survival," Lyra replied. Her own scales had begun to show hints of yellow again, the color of curiosity. She had started to follow Juwu closely, watching her work, asking questions, even attempting to help with some of the simpler tasks. A second solar flare hit just as they finished creating a manual navigation system. This time, both ships were ready. The Prometheus's hardened systems held firm, and the jury-rigged controls on the Navirian vessel allowed them to maintain basic functions. "We need to move away from this star." Captain Minho's voice came through on the emergency channel. "Our scientists predict more flares, possibly stronger ones." Juwu looked at the makeshift control panel they had created. "Can we move your ship with these systems, Lyra?" The Navirian engineer studied the crude interface. "Theoretically, yes, but none of us know how to operate manual controls. We've never needed to learn." "Then I'll teach you," Juwu said. In the hours that followed, Juwu gave an impromptu lesson in manual ship operation to Lyra and several other Navirians. They were quick studies, their natural engineering aptitude evident even without their neural enhancements. As a third, more powerful flare approached, both ships began to move slowly away from the volatile star. The Prometheus led the way, with the Navirian vessel following like a wounded animal. From the makeshift bridge, Juwu and Lyra watched the flare erupt behind them, missing their position by a narrow margin. "We would all be dead," Lyra said quietly. "Without your Archaic methods, my entire crew would be lost." Juwu shrugged. "That's why we keep the old ways alive. Technology fails. Nature surprises us. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most reliable." Lyra turned to face her, all four hands clasped together in what Juwu had learned was a Navirian gesture of deep respect. "My people have always believed that advancement meant moving away from physical interaction with our world," she said. "We thought our neural interfaces represented the pinnacle of engineering. Now I see we were wrong." "Not wrong," Juwu corrected, "just incomplete. There's room for both approaches." For the first time since the crisis began, Lyra's scales shifted to a warm golden color that Juwu had never seen before. "Human," Lyra said, her voice carrying a new tone. "Your Archaic techniques have saved my people. Perhaps there is much more we can learn from each other than I first believed." The Prometheus and the Navirian vessel drifted in the shadow of a small moon, safely distant from the unstable star. 2 weeks had passed since the solar flares, and both ships were well into their repairs. The Navirian neural systems had gradually come back online, but something unexpected had happened. The Navirians had not abandoned the manual controls that Juwu and her team had installed. "I want to understand how this works," Lyra said, holding up a circuit relay. The two engineers sat in what had become their shared workspace, halfway between human utility and Navirian elegance. Tools from both ships lay scattered across smooth surfaces that glowed with soft light. Juwu smiled and took the component. "It's simple, really. When the power flows through here, it creates a magnetic field that pulls this switch close, which then allows current to flow through this secondary circuit. But why not just program it to activate based on power needs?" Lyra asked, her scales shifting between yellow curiosity and blue concentration. "Because this way, it responds automatically to actual conditions, not what we think the conditions should be," Juwu explained. "It can't be hacked, can't get confused by bad data, and works even when other systems are down." Lyra considered this, her large eyes blinking slowly. "On my world, such physical solutions would be considered primitive. But I begin to see their elegance. There is wisdom in simplicity." The cultural exchange flowed both ways. Each morning, Lyra taught Juwu about Navirian quantum engineering principles. The concepts were mind-bending: probability manipulation, consciousness-infused technology, materials that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Juwu struggled to grasp ideas that Navirian children learned before they could speak. "Don't feel bad," Lyra said after a particularly frustrating lesson. "You're trying to understand with your conscious mind what we perceive directly through our neural interfaces. It would be like me trying to taste colors." In the afternoons, Juwu taught Lyra about mechanical systems, material stress points, and the physical principles that govern the universe at scales humans could touch and see. To her surprise, Lyra proved an eager student of these archaic techniques. "Show me again how you knew that bearing was about to fail," Lyra requested, examining a damaged component from the Prometheus's air recycling system. Juwu took the metal ring and spun it slowly. Listen to the sound. Feel the vibration. A good bearing should spin smoothly, quietly. Lyra took the bearing and attempted to spin it with her six-fingered hands. Her movements were becoming more confident with tools, though still lacking the lifetime of muscle memory that Juwu possessed. I hear unevenness, she said after a moment, her head tilted to one side. A rhythm within the sound. Exactly, Juwu exclaimed. That's a bearing about to crack. You can replace it before it fails completely and causes bigger problems. As their work continued, other crew members from both ships began to join their sessions. Human engineers wanted to learn about Navarian quantum field manipulation. Navarian scientists were fascinated by human mechanical ingenuity. The workspace became a classroom, a laboratory, and sometimes, when shifts ended, something like a social gathering. Captain Minho found Juwu there late one evening, sketching a design on an old-fashioned paper notebook, while several Navarians watched with fascination. "Dr. Park," he said. A moment. They stepped into the corridor, where the captain's expression grew serious. The Navarian captain has proposed something unprecedented. They want to establish a formal technology exchange program. Juwu felt a surge of excitement. "That's wonderful news, sir." "It's more than that," Minho replied. "It's historic. No human has ever had this kind of opportunity before. They're specifically requesting that you remain with their ship when we part ways, to continue teaching their engineers. In exchange, they'll send Lyra to Earth." The offer caught Juwu by surprise. Leave the Prometheus. Travel with the Navarians to their homeworld. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. When she returned to the workspace, Lyra immediately sensed something had changed. Her scales shifted to a questioning lavender color. "Your captain told you of our proposal," she stated rather than asked. Juwu nodded, sitting down beside her alien friend. "It's an amazing opportunity, but I never expected to leave my ship, my people." Lyra's forehand stopped working on the circuit she had been assembling. "When I was chosen to be an engineer, I underwent the neural enhancement procedure. It was painful, irreversible. I left behind the life I might have had for the good of my people. Some choices are like that. They hurt, yet open new paths." That night, Juwu couldn't sleep. She floated in her small cabin aboard the Prometheus, staring at the ceiling and thinking about worlds she had never seen. The next morning, she found Lyra in their workspace, surrounded by a strange collection of objects. Human tools arranged in a pattern that seemed to have meaning. "What's this?" Juwu asked. "A decision matrix," Lyra explained. "I learned it from studying your engineering manuals. When faced with complex variables, you humans create these physical representations to aid your thinking. I found it surprisingly helpful." Juwu looked closer. Lyra had arranged wrenches, calibrators, and diagnostic tools in a pattern that somehow represented her thoughts about their exchange program. "And what did your matrix tell you?" Juwu asked. Lyra's scales rippled with a new color, a deep, rich purple that seemed to glow from within. "That some knowledge can only be gained by immersion. That discomfort is the price of growth." "You're accepting the assignment to Earth?" Juwu guessed. "Yes," Lyra said, "if you will accept yours to Navaria." Later that day, both crews gathered in the Prometheus's largest bay for a formal ceremony. Captain Minho and the Navarian captain signed the first-ever human-Navarian cooperative agreement. "This marks the beginning of a new era of shared knowledge," Minho announced. "Two species with different approaches to technology, learning from each other's strengths." As the ceremony concluded, Lyra approached Juwu. In her hands was a small device unlike anything Juwu had seen before. "For you," Lyra said, "a Navarian teaching tool, modified to work without neural implants. It contains our basic engineering principles." Juwu accepted the gift with a smile. "Thank you, though I suspect the most valuable teaching tool I'll have on Navaria will be these." She held up her hands. Lyra's scales shifted to that warm golden color Juwu had seen only a few times before. "Human," she said, her voice carrying a note of what might have been affection. "Your Archaic techniques are incredibly arousing to our intellectual curiosity. Our people have become too separated from the physical universe. You will help us remember what our ancestors knew. That true understanding comes through all senses, not just the mind." Juwu smiled. "And you'll help humans see beyond what we can touch. Together, we might build something greater than either of us could alone." 6 months had passed since Juwu had agreed to travel to Neveria. The alien world orbited a binary star system, its surface covered in vast crystal forests and flowing liquid metal rivers. From the window of her quarters in the Science Exchange Center, Juwu could see the twin suns setting behind the shimmering skyline of Meridian, the Neverian capital. She had become something of a celebrity among the Neverians. The human who fixed things with hands was a curiosity in a society where physical interaction with technology had been abandoned generations ago. Her classes in practical engineering were always filled beyond capacity, with Neverians of all ages eager to learn what they now called fundamental techniques. Today marked the completion of her most ambitious project yet, a hybrid propulsion system that combined Neverian quantum field manipulation with human mechanical engineering principles. The prototype sat in the center of the laboratory, a strange blend of crystalline structures and metal components. "It looks unconventional," said Haru, a young Neverian engineer who had become one of Juwu's most dedicated students. His scales shifted between excited yellow and nervous green as he circled the device. "The best innovations usually do," Juwu replied with a smile. She checked the final connections on the power supply. "Ready for the test." Haru and the other Neverian engineers moved back, giving the device plenty of space. Despite months of training, they still maintained a certain wariness about physical technology. Old habits died hard. Juwu activated the starter sequence. The hybrid drive hummed to life, its crystal core pulsing with energy, while the mechanical components whirred smoothly. On the monitoring screens, energy output readings climbed steadily, exceeding theoretical projections by 23%. "It works," Haru exclaimed, his scales flashing bright gold with excitement. "The quantum field is more stable than in our traditional designs." "That's because the mechanical housing responds to field fluctuations in real time," Juwu explained. "It physically adjusts to maintain optimal conditions without requiring neural input." As the Neverians gathered around the output displays, Juwu stepped back and took a moment to reflect. When she had first arrived, many Neverians had viewed her methods with polite disdain. Physical engineering was considered a primitive approach to problems that evolved species had outgrown. But results spoke louder than cultural bias. The hybrid technologies she had helped develop were proving more efficient, more resilient, and often more elegant than purely neural-based systems. Her communication device chimed, indicating an incoming transmission from Earth. She stepped away from the excited group and activated the holographic display. Lyra's image appeared, her scales a vibrant mix of colors that indicated excitement. "Juwu, can you speak now?" Lyra asked, her forearms moving in animated gestures. "Perfect timing," Juwu replied. "We just successfully tested the hybrid drive." "Excellent news," Lyra said. "We have achieved a breakthrough here as well. The neural interface prototype has passed all human compatibility tests. The first volunteers will begin training next week." This was the other half of their exchange program. While Juwu taught Neverians the value of physical engineering, Lyra was adapting Neverian neural technology for human use, not to replace hands-on skills, but to complement them, giving human engineers the ability to feel systems in ways previously impossible. "Any side effects?" Juwu asked. "None significant," Lyra replied. Though several test subjects report dreaming about engine schematics, her scales rippled with what Juwu now recognized as amusement. "Your species adapts remarkably well to new sensory inputs." "Speaking of adaptation," Juwu said, The High Council has approved our joint proposal. Construction of the first hybrid vessel begins next month. This was their ultimate goal, a ship designed from its conception to blend the best of both engineering philosophies. It would have neural interfaces and manual controls, quantum field generators and mechanical backup systems, consciousness-infused materials and physical maintenance access points. A true synthesis of approaches. The human delegation arrives tomorrow to finalize the details. Juwu continued. Captain Minho will be leading them. I will return to Neveria with them, Lyra said. My work here is complete for now, and I miss our discussions. Juwu smiled at the admission. Over the months of separation, their professional respect had deepened into a friendship that transcended their biological differences. They were, in many ways, pioneers of a new kind of relationship between their species. The next day, Juwu stood with the Neverian High Council as the human diplomatic vessel descended through the atmosphere. Its design already showed influence from the exchange program, sleeker than traditional human ships, with integrated Neverian technology visible in its propulsion system. As the humans disembarked, Juwu spotted Captain Minho leading the delegation. Behind him walked Lyra, her scales shifting through a rainbow of colors that reflected her excitement at returning to her homeworld. The formal greetings between the delegations were brief but warm. Afterward, Lyra approached Juwu, holding what appeared to be a small metal and crystal device. A gift, she said, offering it to Juwu. The first successful human-compatible neural interface, calibrated specifically for you. Juwu accepted it with reverence, understanding its significance. Thank you. I'm honored. Don't be too honored, Lyra said, her scales rippling with amusement. It still requires manual activation. She pointed to a small button on its surface. We couldn't quite eliminate all physical components. Nor should we, Juwu replied with a smile. That's the whole point, isn't it? Later, as the twin suns set over the crystal spires of Meridian, Juwu and Lyra stood on the observation deck of the Science Exchange Center. Below them, teams of human and Neverian engineers worked together on the preliminary designs for the hybrid vessel. 6 months ago, I thought your methods were hopelessly outdated, Lyra admitted. I could not understand why any advanced species would choose to interact with technology through such limited means. And now? Juwu asked. Lyra's scales shifted to that deep, warm golden color that Juwu had come to recognize as profound respect. Now I understand that there is wisdom in maintaining connection to the physical world, she said. Neural technology lets us perceive what hands cannot touch, but your approach grounds that perception in reality. Juwu nodded. And your neural interfaces will help humans perceive beyond what our senses allow naturally. Together, we become more than either could be alone. As night fell over Neveria, lights came on in the laboratory below. Humans and Neverians working side by side, each learning from the other, creating something new from their combined knowledge. Human, Lyra said softly, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for moments of true insight. Your Archaic techniques aren't just arousing to our curiosity anymore. They have become essential to our future. Juwu smiled. As your advanced methods have become essential to ours. That's the beauty of synthesis, finding strength in different approaches. The first star appeared in the Neverian sky, soon to be joined by thousands more. Somewhere out there, other species waited to be discovered, with their own approaches, their own wisdoms. The universe, Juwu reflected, was vast enough for endless forms of ingenuity, and for those willing to learn from each other, the possibilities were as infinite as the stars themselves.